Good evening all, and welcome. College can certainly be an enlightening experience for most, but it can have its creepy side, as we're about to find out. So get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. I attend a relatively small Christian college. This college has a very old, very large library which I work at. I've been working at it going on about a year, so I've been here late at night and such. Now, despite being a Christian, I am rather skeptical in regards to spirits and ghosts, but I believe they are tricks of the mind. Now, I have a friend called Veronica, and she is very in tune with spiritual things, most likely from her history of being attacked by spirits when she would visit her Wiccan father. She works at the library too, and even during the times when the library is mostly completely empty, she believes there's some kind of entity on the third floor, such that she actually does all in her power to avoid going up there alone. Now, I'd never thought anything about the third floor, but not too long after our discussion I went up there alone very late at night. A lot of the aisles had lights off and it was very dark outside. As I turned around, I saw something slip back into one of the aisles, and I quickly noped out of there. Since then, I have found some interesting developments. I found out the college is extremely old and has been in existence for over 150 years. 120 or so spent at the current location. It also retains very old buildings, some being over a century old. I told everyone about the weird shadow creature on the third floor of the library, but now I have more information. I recently discovered that the building, built in the early 1900s, was at first a church before being remodeled into a library. This goes towards the history of the building. Next, I had another encounter. I was once again tasked with shelving books on the third floor and had to go down one of the side units. To describe it, imagine a big rectangle with two lines parallel and through the middle. Those lines are walkways, and to the far right are study areas and the windows, letting in light, and all the way to the left is bookshelves lit by lights. Now, the way the lighting works on those side tracks is they have a big strip of tubes down the middle of the rows, and you press a button which turns on the light and the timer. I've been told and have experienced that the timers for the lights stay on and should last an hour or so. That being said, I turn on the lights in the side stacks, head on it, and start shelving books. When not a minute later, the lights flicker off. I then hear rapid footsteps walking away. I, of course, am already uncomfortable on the third floor, so I rush to see if it's a co-worker who knows it's me upstairs. Nope. I look 2 to 3 rows in the direction and see no one, nor any indication of a person. These rows are too big, so that means someone would have had to have dashed about 20 plus feet and hide in another black stack to have outrun me, and it didn't sound like they were running. So I call it quits there and then and head back down, telling my supervisor that the shelves were too tight for the other books. Recently, however, she sent me to shelve books at least once a week, and some patron, God knows why, seems to solely take books from the third floor. To combat the skeptics who might say it's a wiring issue or faulty lighting, we have had the campus maintenance team up there a handful of times, and more for the stack, and they can absolutely find nothing wrong with it. I've also been asking around and am not the only one who feels watched on the third floor. Not only this, one of my female friends went into one of the corners of the stacks looking for a book, and felt the temperature drop down so much she began to shiver and almost fainted. This was when it was about 80 or so degrees outside. This happened to me way back in my college life. I still live in Asia. I was in a boys' dormitory, and it was a 5-story dormitory building. In front of our dormitory is the all-girls dormitory. There the paranormal activity happened. The same building with us, 5-story too, Same building plan since the owner of the dormitory is the same. It's like copy-paste blueprints on each side of the road. I met this girl who was in that dormitory. We happened to see each other every morning and along the way to school, making me have an excuse to walk with her every morning. She's pretty and friendly, so knowing her wasn't that hard. We were also at the same university, just at a different program. I was in civil engineering and she was in chemical engineering. I'm a third-grade college student, while she's a fresh one. Let's say older college boy appeal better to freshman girls. So we get on the dating scene fast and got hooked up pretty quickly. I kind of befriended the night shift security, and I know the security guard since I always greet him whenever I walk her every night. I bribed him one night so that I could stay up there. The dormitory have this strict rule of no visitors 24 hours, and the girls' dormitory has a curfew of 10 p.m. to 5 a.m., but they lack CCTV. She didn't share a room, she rented the solo room, which cost the same amount as what we pay for a room of 4. Our first night was awesome, but I had to go around 4 a.m. and return to my own dormitory. It was around 3:30 a.m. when I woke up and got ready to go outside. I didn't wake her since we still had class later. I got out of her room, then in the hallway. On my right is straight on their toilet, which is shared, then on my left was leading to stairs. I was about to go down the stairs when I heard a door opening, so I ducked, quickly walked down the stairs slowly. I didn't want to cause a noise. She's in the 4th floor, so I have a long way to go. I was at the middle of a landing of the stairs leading to the 3rd floor, when someone called me. "Hey." I got startled and looked up. There wasn't anyone there. I figured it out that it could be her. Her voice is like whispering, or somehow low with a kind of horsey husk. I went upstairs again to look, but there's no one there. I got some chills, but it was almost 4 a.m., and security shift is around 4:30, so I headed down. Then again, I was in the landing and I heard her voice 2 consecutive times. I went upstairs again, but there's no one. I turn around and say screw it. Run to the 2nd floor and I heard it again, a chuckle or giggle, and I rushed to the ground floor, saw the security guard sleeping, and passed him and went straight to my own dorm. I woke up late, missed 2 classes that day, and several phone calls from her and my friends. My dorm mates didn't wake me. I called her and asked her to meet me at this fast food place where we usually eat lunch, and explained everything that happened. She told me it was the ghost of the girl who ended her life tragically in that building. Well, I got creeped out by that. She told me that the girl did it because she got pregnant and her lover left her. Depressed and afraid of her parents, she ended her own life. I asked her where she got the info from, and she said that the janitor told her about it. From that day onwards, I didn't return to her dorm. I didn't take my chances of seeing that ghost girl again. I studied abroad in Oxfordshire, England, in 2012, and lived in an abbey that was built in 1215. On this day, it was a beautiful sunny day, and for some reason, I was the only one in the abbey. It was a small group of us studying here, maybe 40 to 45 altogether. I was in the library sitting on a couch located under a window that was across the room from a wall with a fireplace. The door in the library to the left of the fireplace, and I was reading a book for class when suddenly, over the top of my book in my peripheral, I saw a man walk into the room with me. He walked by the fireplace and was continuing into the room. He was a tall man, and what I noticed immediately was that he was wearing a full suit. My first thought was that it was very early morning or late afternoon, and I wondered who the heck is wearing a suit right now. I looked up from my book to acknowledge him, and no one was there. I was completely alone in the room. I got goosebumps, and my heart beat harder in my chest. But I wasn't terrified or anything. I just kind of went, okay, and kept reading my book. I had forgotten about it until a few nights later, when a friend of mine told me the receptionist had been telling her ghost stories about the Abbey. One of the stories had been that when it was quiet in the library, students reported seeing a butler walking around. A butler. I flushed bright red when she told me, and I immediately thought of the man in the suit. I went back to the library a few more times on my own when I studied there, but I never saw him again. The following took place over the summer of 2016 at Wentworth Military Academy and College in Lexington, Missouri. I attended the school for their Camp LEAD program, a 3 to 5 week-long summer camp designed to introduce cadets to a military-style structure. When I arrived at the campus, one of the older cadets gave me a tour of the place, so I would know where everything was. The first building he showed me was Hickman Hall, the oldest building on the campus and rumored to be the most haunted. He showed me one of the windows on the building. There was a face drawn in dust. However, the interesting part about it is that the face is drawn in between the planes of glass. The school is located in the middle of the US, also known as Tornado Alley. Thus, windows need to be double or triple thick to ensure they don't break. The face showed up out of the blue around the turn of the millennium, and no one knows who drew it. Hickman Hall is home to numerous rumors and haunted stories. For example, in 1995, one night, around 3 a.m., every single door in the second floor flew open simultaneously. The doors inside are heavy-weighted doors that are designed to be hard to throw open. Another time, a cadet saw a floating Civil War-era general walking around and going into the closed rooms. The thought behind this is because the school is built on the grounds of the Battle of Lexington, a battle during the Civil War. Other times, cadets heard a particular door slam to then discover that it had been locked and hadn't opened in years. After a point, the cadets refused to live in the building, and the school built new barracks. They locked the door to Hickman Hall, and no one has been in or out for 15 years. I also had my own spiritual experience at the camp. One night, I was walking back to my room after I finished running on the track with my roommate and one other cadet. As we were walking about 100 yards away from Hickman Hall, we looked at the face to see a very bright white light emanating from that room. Our first obvious thought was that it was simply a street light shining through the building from the other side, as all the blinds and doors were open in the building. However, upon further investigation, we determined that could not have been it for 2 reasons. First was that the street lamps around the building were of a yellow nature, while this light was bright white. Second, and the more prominent reason, was that the light stayed in the middle of the room, even when we walked around at different angles. The building had no power, as why would it need to? And there were no lights that hung in the very center of the room. The other cadet that was with us had been attending the school for 3 years, so he knew the place inside and out. He never heard nor saw anything like that before, and we didn't see anything like that for the rest of camp. I have no idea what this light was, so I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Another building I was shown on my tour was the academic building. He told us a lot of rumors about the deaths related to that building, but none of them were confirmed except for one around 1986. A cadet became very depressed and tragically ended his life in the basement of the building. He used a noose on one of the pipes in the ceiling, and at his feet, at his boots, were his journal. The journal was filled with demonic drawings, poems, and the like. Instead of filling the room up with concrete, the school simply locked the door and put the words, "The Dark Room," on the door. For years, cadets could hear whispers coming from the basement, and one day the imprint of a hand was found embedded in the wall on the stairs heading up. Now, some punk cadet could have done that in the night to mess with people, so I can't say 100% that it was supernatural in origin. At the end of our tour, my first roommate, of which I had 2, came running out to say, "Hey, you won't believe what Luke just did." Shortly after Luke came running up, I explained to them why doing something like that is a bad idea. After a while, We all went inside and went into Luke's room. After a few minutes I left, and it was just Luke and Ashton, his roommate, in the room. The two of them were sitting up on their bunks and were talking about what just happened, when suddenly Ashton's chair moved a solid 2.5 feet, and his backpack, which was hanging on the back of the chair, fell to the floor. They came running out, screaming bloody murder. We went back to investigate and found all the windows and doors closed, along with the air conditioning being off when the chair moved. There was no way the wind moved that chair. It was also a reasonably heavy backpack. I can't recall how it came to happen, but I ended up looking under Luke's desk. Drawn on the underside of his desk drawer in permanent marker was a perfectly detailed Ouija board. Luke and Ashton started freaking out. We had the drawings removed, as the cader had a marker remover. For the rest of the night they were on edge and freaked out. One of the other cadets asked me if he could walk around with my Bible, to which I gladly obliged. A week later I moved down to the other end of the hall, in the room of my second roommate, the one who was with me when I first saw the aforementioned light. One night 2 older cadets decided to use a Ouija board they drew on the lid of a tub container. At first nothing happened, so after a half hour they put it away and went to sleep. At 3 in the morning they woke up to 2 very loud, very distinct knocks on their door. At first, they thought it was just night watch knocking. As it's a military camp, they have a member of the cader walk up and down the halls around 2 in the morning with red lens lights. They simply walk up to the door and shine the light through the window in the door to make sure both cadets are still in bed, to make sure no cadets sneak out. As earlier in camp, 3 cadets snuck out and got extremely drunk and ended up being arrested. The red lens is to protect the eyes of the cadet, and just a simple check. After a few seconds, the cadets realized the knocks did not come from the door to the hallway, but rather from their bathroom. The bathroom had no window nor any access to the outside aside from the door to the rest of the room. They were petrified as they opened up the door to find no one inside the bathroom, and their door to the hallway was locked. The first thought was that it was a mouse. However, mice don't make 2 distinct loud knocks on doors. These are just a few of the bizarre experiences I have found during my time at Wentworth Military Academy and College. Unfortunately, the school has since closed due to lack of funding, and I am no longer able to visit the campus. Early into college, I took a class that required a team project. I didn't know anyone in the class or the area, so I was paired by the professor with a guy called Frank. Frank seemed quiet and mellow, like me, so I thought it would go smoothly. Before leaving class, we exchanged numbers and swapped ideas for the paper we had to write together. The project itself ran smoothly. We never got together outside of class to work on it, but completed it with Google Docs and occasional texts and got a high grade. I thought that would be the end of our acquaintanceship, but I was wrong. He asked me out over text and I politely told him I was flattered but not interested. Apparently that wasn't a good enough hint because he kept texting me. He would ask me out on dates or to come over to my dorm if I would tell him which one it was. At this point I was creeped out and annoyed, so I stopped answering him. The next few days he texted me. Frank would compliment my outfit that day, when I hadn't seen him the whole day, but apparently he had seen me. I felt like I was being watched everywhere on campus. He said, "That green color looks good on you. Your hair's pretty today." A few more weeks passed and he started to get angry. He would text me asking me where I was and why I didn't show up for a date, things I never agreed to. I still hadn't texted him back this whole time. He'd say things like, "Looking forward to pizza with you tonight. Catch you at the movies at 7. I definitely should have blocked him by then. He followed me on my Instagram at the time, and I'd posted a picture of my cat, who had unexpectedly passed away, along with a caption of talking about how much I missed him. He liked the photo, then sent me a 2-word text, "Meow meow." I finally blocked Frank on everything, Phone, social media, the whole thing. He would friend request me once from what must have been a second account, but I quickly blocked it too. Over the next years of college, I would occasionally see him on campus. He'd keep his head down around me, but he always made me nervous after that. I'd rather not meet him again. I attended a small liberal arts university with a student population of 3,600. However, during the summer, this population obviously goes down considerably, and the campus is mostly empty. You'll occasionally see someone who works there or a student working there during the summer, but for the most part it's pretty deserted. The summer between my junior and senior year, I worked on campus for the teams that host and run any conferences and events that take place. The school will rent out dorms and event space for groups, and students are in charge of cleaning, organizing, and managing these groups for their stay. A sort of hospitality team. As part of this, we would have someone at the front desk of the main university building and any dorms which were occupied from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. to field any questions or to otherwise help as needed. We each were required to work a certain number of shifts each week, and one of the shifts I was signed up for was 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the main university building. Absolutely nothing happened that night. I spent the evening catching up on The Daily Show. Rough job, I know. Nobody came by the center, nobody called, and we were trusted with the keys to the building, and whoever had the last shift of that evening had to lock up. As I stood outside locking the door, I heard someone ask behind me, "What time is it?" Having locked the door, I turned around, looked at my cell phone and replied, "It's 11:01. The guy was around my age. I knew he wasn't a student. It was a small enough school where even if you don't know everyone, you generally recognized faces, and you definitely knew the handful of students working there over the summer. I started to walk across campus to the dorm, where they housed all the summer student workers, but I only got about 10 feet before I knew something was wrong. I stopped and turned around, and saw the guy following behind me. And he stopped as well. I figured he could just be heading the same way, so I continued walking, and we played this weird game of red light, green light about twice more for another 50 feet. It was at that moment I realized this was very, very wrong, and he was following me. "Can I help you?" I asked, praying perhaps he was just lost. "I'm locked out my place tonight," he replied. Not sure what to respond to that, I said, "Sorry to hear that. I hope you get back in." If this isn't a classic case of girls being conditioned to be polite and non-aggressive, even in a case where they shouldn't be expected to be, then I don't know what is. I had no idea what to do, so I carried on walking. My mind was racing. I turned to look at him a few times, and even directly stopped and looked at him once to let him know that I saw him. I was onto him. I felt so foolish I didn't know whether to scream or run or call someone on my phone. All of these, looking back, would have been much better options than just continue to walk with him following me. But it's like my brain wasn't working. I was panicking. I don't have a purse or anything, so I don't think he was trying to rob me. Thankfully, I passed by a dorm that had occupants in it, and my friend Mike, who was manning the front desk there the night, had decided to step out and smoke a cigarette. I had never been so glad to see someone smoking a cancer stick. "Mike, hi." I started towards him. He looked over, saw me, saw the guy following me, and somehow immediately knew something was wrong. I don't know whether it was panic on my face or the fact that the guy was acting so shady, but I'm glad he spotted it. I didn't even have to say anything, he just looked at me and said, "Oh, I'm done here. Let's head back together." Of course, as soon as he saw Mike, my follower peeled off. I told Mike what happened, and as we walked back, he kept an eye out for him. But he was nowhere to be found. I thought it was the end of it. However, as we walked across the campus, we saw another summer worker, Julie, walking really fast looking behind her. Sure enough, there was Creepy McCreepy person. He had moved on quickly. "Julie," we yelled. As soon as he saw us, her face crumpled into the most relieved look I'd ever seen. The creeper ran away, and we all walked back to the dorm together. As soon as we were inside, we were completely freaking out and getting on our phone to call campus police. When we heard the door of the dorm violently jiggling, luckily you need an access card to get inside, but whoever was out there was trying awfully hard to get in. Campus police never found him. I thank God for Mike's nicotine addiction, and I don't take any more late night shifts. I continued to watch The Late Show though. This past year was my senior year of college, and I was thrilled to be living with an alumni of my sorority who I was very close with, Abby. We weren't actually supposed to be living in the apartment we ended up in. We were originally going to be living in a townhouse with 2 other girls, but they started so much drama a month before we were supposed to move in that we had to contact our landlord to find a different place with their moving company to live. Thankfully, we found a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom basement apartment in a quiet area off campus. The first month was fine and without incident, but as the days went by, some strange things began to happen in the apartment. One morning, Abby woke up to a kitchen cabinet open. She wasn't that concerned about it and figured that I had just forgotten to shut it the night before. The next morning, a different cabinet was open, and once again she shrugged it off. However, I went home one weekend and she woke up to find every cabinet in the kitchen wide open and the sink running. Needless to say, Abby was scared and spent the night at her boyfriend's. 2 weeks later, we were watching TV and heard the bathroom door close. I tried to calm Abby down by saying that the fan we kept in the bathroom blew it closed. However, when we went to bed, we thought we could hear someone walking around in our living room. There's no way someone broke into our apartment and hid the whole day only to come out at night and mess with us. I was home the whole day, and Abby was home from 11 in the morning. That incident took place shortly before Christmas break, and all was calm in the apartment until February. Abby had gone home for the weekend, and I was home alone, relaxing on the couch and doing homework. It was pretty late at night, so I turned on the TV for background noise and curled up on the couch to sleep. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning to see Abby walking through the front door smiling but not saying anything. I blinked, still groggy from sleep, and asked if she was okay. She just looked at me and proceeded to take off her shoes and walk into the kitchen. Something about her didn't seem right, like this girl looked like Abby and walked like Abby, but it wasn't her. I asked her again if she was okay, because it was so early in the morning for her to be coming home. Abby looked at me and smiled and began washing something in the sink. Something inside me felt a profound sense of dread, like I was in danger and needed to get away. As quickly as possible, I went to my room and locked my door. My roommate followed me, because I heard someone tapping their fingers against the door. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, it wouldn't stop. I didn't say another word, because it felt like if I did acknowledge her, it gave her more strength. I know that doesn't make much sense, but that was my instinct. I curled up beneath my blankets and stared at my bedroom door, almost waiting for her to kick it in. My eyes felt heavy, and the tapping was almost like a metronome enticing me to sleep. As I drifted back to sleep, the taps seemed to slow down to a trickle. The morning after, I was exhausted. It felt like I had taken 20 Advil PM to help me sleep. But I remember everything that had happened. Cautiously, I left my room and saw Abby's bed had not been disturbed or slept in. I went to the living room and her shoes and purse weren't there. A cold feeling crept into my spine as I sent her a text asking if she'd come home that night. She said no, she hadn't and wouldn't be coming home for another 2 days. But then I checked the sink, and the bowl Abby had been washing had been cleaned and put away. I firmly believe I was not dreaming or hallucinating, and I know this wasn't some elaborate prank by Abby, because she could never do anything like that. I firmly believe something took her shape that night and its intentions weren't good. There were a few other experiences in their apartment, but nothing so drastic as what I went through that night. This happened during my final year in college. I took a fun class called Theatre in LA, which is basically a class where you watch different plays once a week all over LA. Since the theatres are all over the place and not everyone had a car, the professor organized a carpool system you could volunteer into. I know what it's like to be carless in LA, so I volunteered to drive someone around, and I got partnered with Bob. It started out okay. He really made himself comfortable in my car, changing the music non-stop and going through my glove compartment, snacks and water, without asking me. But whatever. I've met a lot of people with boundary issues before. Things started picking up when we found out we had the same taste in music. We got talking. I mentioned I had a fake ID, and he mentioned he smoked up. I mentioned I wanted to try weed, but I haven't had the opportunity to, as I'm non-American and only moved to the US for college, too nerdy to get invited to fun stuff, and so far so good. Then my mum called. I had to answer, since my mum is the type who would keep calling until you'd answer. My car has one of those Bluetooth speakers, so he could hear the entire conversation. But my mum and I were speaking in Indonesian, so I didn't care. At random parts of the conversation he'd start giggling, and it was making me really self-conscious. Did he think I sounded funny? After I hung up, I asked, "What's so funny?" "Nothing." Okay, so now we're driving in an awkward silence. Then he started making this weird hee-hee noise. It was a cross between a bray and a wheeze and a giggle. I asked him if he was okay, if he was having an asthma attack or something. He said it was fine, and at random parts of the drive he'd laugh on his own and make that weird noise. Things are getting weird now. We finally arrive at the theatre, and I quickly talked to the other people to get away from him. Then realized loudly he yelled, "Hey, take your fake ID out and buy me booze." Why are you yelling that out loud? Come on, buy booze, buy booze. This girl quickly rescued me by dragging me to the bathroom with her. Apparently he was harassing her earlier for cocaine. She doesn't do coke or even said anything about it. He met her for the first time ever, and the first thing he said was, "Hey, do you have coke?" Anyway, the play was over close to midnight, and it was time to go home. Bob went, "Hey, do you want to find weed? Drive us downtown and let's look for some." No, I'm not driving downtown in the middle of the night. I told him no, and he kept on whining and chanting. This was before medical marijuana was legalized, so I kept telling him to shut up. During the car ride back, he kept alternating between whining and chanting, "Let's get weed," and "I want to stop at a food joint," and laughing randomly on his own. Thanks to the jam trying to get out of the movie theater, it was past midnight, so I was exhausted. I was in no mood to eat, even if he were normal, and I kept telling him that I had plenty of snacks in the car and he could help himself to, which he did, but he wouldn't stop whining. I just ended up turning it all out, but he never stopped. I was so relieved when I dropped him off. The next day was Saturday, and I was woken up by a phone call. It was Bob, since he had my number as we were carpool buddies. "Hello?" I had no idea why he was shouting. There was no noise in the background. "Buy me booze. You have fake ID, you need to buy me booze." What the hell? He woke me up for that? I was half asleep, told him very bluntly to piss off. After that, I constantly got calls from Bob at random times, including the middle of the night. Most of them would just be asking for a free ride or booze or whatever. He wouldn't stop laughing. He wouldn't say anything, he'd just laugh. He had various different laughs too. The evil scientist, the cartoon villain, the Mickey Mouse on helium laugh. And I know this sounds comical, but I was petrified. The weirdest call I got from him was at 2 a.m. He went, "Hey, I found a storage container on campus. I'm in it now. Join me." He tried asking me where I was on campus so we could hang out, but obviously I didn't tell him. He actually replied with, "I'll just follow you back next time." Which doesn't sound that creepy, but with Bob saying it, I thought he'd be wearing a shawl made of entrails soon enough. Obviously, I had to end this arrangement, but I was scared of getting on his bad side since he was giving me mentally unstable vibes. I lied and told him that my very conservative Asian parents were worried about me driving alone at night with a strange man, so they insisted on me carpooling with a family friend instead. Out of desperation, I went to the only person in class I sort of knew and also had a car, Steve, and I explained the situation. Steve is someone I've met once at a party, but luckily he was awesome, and he agreed to back up my story and drive me to the theatre for the rest of the semester. Luckily for me, Steve happened to be Asian too, so the story seemed believable, because yes, Bob questioned me about it. Steve also happened to be really buff and made sure he always placed himself in between Bob and me, so Bob kind of left me alone after that. I blocked Bob's number, told him I changed it, and conveniently kept forgetting to give it to him. Bob apparently had a hard time finding another carpool buddy. Everyone found him creepy, and no one lasted more than one ride with him, and eventually stopped coming to the class. I think the professor failed him too. I do feel bad because I think the guy may have some untreated mental issues or a drug problem, but that dude really scared me. When I was a freshman in college, I lived in one of the oldest buildings on campus, built around 1891. The campus had originally been a teaching college for young women, and for some time when a young girl named Florence was attending the school during World War I, she had been involved with a young man at the time who had been drafted to fight overseas, and he promised to keep in touch with Florence. They had written letters to one another over time, but the letters from Florence's lover had slowly stopped over the course of a few weeks. During this time, Florence became desperately depressed. At the time that she was living in the building, there had been a sunroom on the 4th floor that had several beams across the ceiling. Florence also lived at the very end of the sunroom. During her depression, Florence sadly took a rope and used it to hang herself from the end of the ceiling at the sunroom. Not long after, Florence's lover returned home safely, only to hear of Florence's passing. He returned to her hometown, and then ended his own life in the hopes to being reunited with his love. Fast forward almost a century, to 2011. I was moving into my room for the first time, and I happened to be in the same building that Florence had lived in, at the base of the stairs that led up to her old room. The entire building had been renovated in 2003. The sunroom was closed off. Florence's room became a storage room, and the 4th floor was separated into 2 wings, one for women and one for men. My roommate finally made it, and we both began to settle in and make friends with our neighbors. We had eventually brought a group of our friends to hang out with us just outside of our room, amongst some of our neighbors, when one of our friends asked if they could do a séance in our room, considering how near our room was to Florence's old room. I looked at my roommate not knowing what to say. She was okay with it, eventually, but didn't stay for the whole séance. We created a Ouija board out of a piece of paper and used a pencil as the planchette. We didn't get many responses, however the scariest part was everything that happened the night after everyone left. My roommate decided she wasn't comfortable staying there that night and stayed with some friends for the night, and a few nights following. I stayed back. A few hours after I went to bed, I was awoken to the sound of branches breaking right by the head of my bed. I sat straight up and started to look around the room to see what could have made that sound, and had noticed that my roommate's message board had detached from the wall. It slid down the wall and landed on her desk as soon as I saw it detach. The worst part was the message board was on the complete opposite end of the room as the head of my bed, and I heard the cracking right next to my head. I immediately texted my roommate about what happened and never played with a Ouija board in that room again. We had this guy at my school who kind of had a mental breakdown near the end of the semester and stopped taking his meds and ran into the woods and was never found again. But he was banned on campus for supposedly attempting to assault someone. But anyway, upon arriving back from Christmas break, we were having a little board game night in the dorm common area, and the elevator was behind us. Around 1 AM or so, the elevator doors open, and we saw him glaring at us. Thinking he was alive, we all got up and started our way to the elevator, and then the door shut, and we started opening the elevator, and finally they opened, and some guy got off and asked him which floor he came from, and did anyone get off. He said first, no. We immediately called campus security, and they started reviewing the tapes, and the only thing they could find was the elevator, starting on the first floor, going up to the second, which we were on, and then us getting up, rushing to the door, then it closed, and then another guy called the elevator and him getting on and off. But another weird thing is we were doing humans versus zombies that March. We had a mission where we had to protect the water from some pond in the woods on the pier, and then the next day we had another mission where we had to pass the pond, and we found all of the guys' clothes just folded up on the pier. And since it was late, we know nobody went out to that place, and the next mission was in the morning, so we were the only ones there the whole night. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed these college stories, university stories. I liked the mix of kind of like creeper and paranormal. I think they were particularly interesting. Be sure to let me know down below what your thoughts of this video were. As always, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my lovely patrons. And for a small donation every month, you can have your name at the end of every video, and for a little bit more, receive a handful of awesome perks. Let me know what you think. It is pretty cool, if interested. The link is in the description, by the way. As is the link to my email and Reddit, if you have a story that you would like to share, which will be read in a future episode, assuming you put in enough punctuation, paragraphing, and good grammar. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.